Welcome to Lesson 9. This lesson is about graphic aids. What are graphic aids? Graphic aids present information in pictorial form or in other specific formats in order to consolidate, clarify, or prove the written material they go with. Now, it's very important to keep this in mind. Graphic aids accompany text. I repeat, graphic aids accompany text. Now, the purpose of providing a graph or a table is to support what's written in the text. The graphic aid is supposed to be a simplified yet clear and organized presentation of data. Okay, so always remember that your graphic aid, whether it's a graph or a table, should be clear, simplified, yet organized to support what's written or to supplement what's written in the text or what's provided in the text. Make sure also that the graphic aid is as close as possible to the text. Try to not separate the table or the graph from the text that it is explaining. But if it is really impossible to put the graph or the table and the text on one page, okay, so then you may separate the two, but make sure that in the text, there's going to be a mentioning, okay, a referral to your readers to look into the graphic aid, which is going to appear on the next page. Okay, repeat, if you're going to separate the graphic aid from the text that it is accompanying, make sure to mention in the text something like, please refer to table blank on the next page, okay? Make a statement that would make your reader look into the graphic aid that is supporting the text. Bullet 2. Graphs are pictures that help us understand amounts and numbers. These amounts or numbers are called data. There are many kinds of graphs, each having special parts. On the next slides, we will be reviewing the different kinds of graphs. Okay, can you guess what this is, or can you recall what this is? A blank graph is shaped like a circle. It is divided into fractions, okay, that look like pieces of pie. Many times the fractional parts are different colors and a key explains the colors. So what is this? Okay, so I hope that you remember that this is a pie chart or a pie graph. Now what about this one? A blank graph uses bars to show data. The bars can be vertical, up and down, or horizontal, which means across. The data can be in words or numbers. So obviously, this one here is an example of a bar graph. A blank graph uses pictures or symbols to show data. Yan, pictures or symbols to show data. One picture often stands for more than one vote. So a key, this is an example of a key, is necessary to understand the symbols. So do you remember what type of graph this is? Okay, this is a pictograph. Okay, a pictograph. Now what about this one? A blank graph shows points plotted on a graph. Points, these are the points. These are the points plotted on this type of graph. The points are then connected to form a line. So what is this? Obviously, this is a line graph. How about the last one? A blank is a diagram that uses connected boxes, circles, and other shapes, other shapes to show the steps in a process or a procedure. Do you know what this is called? Do you still remember? This is obviously a flow chart. Okay, this is a flow chart. Sorry for the handwriting. Okay, so don't forget, this is a flow chart, and I hope that your memory has been refreshed, and now you remember, you recall the different and the usual types of graphs. Now let us move on to the process of interpreting graphs. How do we interpret graphs? Okay, on this slide, you are seeing 9 steps to interpreting graphs. Okay? In writing an interpretation for a graph, you need to, of course, come up with several organized paragraphs. Steps 1 to 6 may actually appear in your introduction to the graph. Intro. When you introduce the graph, you have to mention its title. The title tells the topic or tells us what the graph is about. Also in the introduction, you may mention something about or more about the graph. Sometimes there are notes below graphs. Okay? At times, I repeat, at times, there are notes below graphs. Now, when you see notes underneath a table or underneath a particular type of graph, mention that as well. Often, notes tell us the source, the original source of a borrowed table or a borrowed graph. Now, if there are notes below a graphic aid, you have to mention those notes as well in a succinct way, in a brief way, mention those in the intro. Other than the title and the other or the additional info about the graph or the table, you should also mention about the labels and the legends. What are being measured in the graphic aid? Okay, what are the types of data exposed or shown in the graphic aid? You mentioned the x-axis, you mentioned the y-axis, and what's in those axes. Mention those in the intro. And this one too, number 6. Mention what is being measured or what data are being compared and what are the units of measurements. Basically, in the introduction, you simply describe. Okay, describe. Walang E. Okay, you simply describe the graphic aid. Okay, is that clear? In the introduction, simply describe the graphic aid. Simply describe the table, simply describe the graph, whatever the type is. Mention its title. If underneath it there are notes that tell you about the source or any additional information about it, mention those as well briefly, okay, shortly or succinctly. Okay, and then of course do not forget to mention the things that are being compared or that are being measured in that graphic aid. And if there are symbols or labels, you have to mention them as well. For example, it's a pictograph and an apple is used to measure a particular number of votes. You have to mention the apple and what it symbolizes or what is its equivalent. Okay, so that should be the content of your introduction. Next, in one of the body paragraphs, I repeat, in one of the body paragraphs, meaning to say this could be paragraph 2, in paragraph 2, focus on the trends or the very obvious patterns. In the second paragraph, as well as perhaps the third paragraph, you should only focus on the highlighted, on the obvious and important trends or patterns. Do not, I repeat, do not discuss all the data in the table. Okay, do not mention one by one. For example, it's a bar graph with several or with a number of years which are being compared with data which are being compared. Do not discuss every year. Okay, do not discuss every year. I'm being repetitive here because this is a usual mistake. Okay, going into too much details. What you should do in the next paragraph is to focus only on one or two or perhaps three particular and obvious trends. What are trends? The differences, similarities. Okay. And then number 8. So this is another paragraph. This could be your second paragraph, paragraph 2, body paragraph 2. After focusing on the trends in one paragraph, you may say some more by explaining how the graph proves what's in the text. Okay? Or you may move on to another trend to discuss in paragraph 3. If you no longer have trends to discuss, okay, if there's nothing else to discuss, there are only a few trends in the graphs, then you may skip 3, you may skip paragraph 3 and move on to the conclusion. Okay, so let's see an example. Okay, so here is an example. So, assuming that you are given the task to interpret these two graphic aids. So, do you still remember the first thing to do? Okay, first thing to do is to carefully look at the two graphic aids presented to you. Look at the title, or if there are two graphs, look at the titles. Okay, and try to analyze the data presented in the graphs. The first paragraph should be an introduction of the graphic aid. In this case, we have two graphic aids. We should, of course, name or identify the type of graphic aid provided. So what type of graphic aid is this? These two are pie charts. So mention in the introduction the type of graphic aid. So in this case, we have here two pie charts. Next, what is the purpose of these two pie charts? What are they here for? What are they doing with the data? So obviously, we have two pie charts here because we are expected to compare. Okay, they are comparing what? What kind of data? What are they comparing? So take a look at the title to know more about the graphic aids. They are comparing the highest level of education of women in some land between 2 years. What are those years? Specify them. 1945 and 1995. So that's it. This is a simple and effective introduction to the graphic aids presented. So don't forget that you have to introduce the graphic aid provided in a graded task, okay, or in a written task. Next, in the next paragraph, are you supposed to do something like this? In 1945, 35% of women did not attend school. 35% finished third grade, 15% finished year 6, 10% finished year 9, 4% finished year 12, and only 1% finished first degree. Is that how you should be reading data in a graphic aid? The answer is very clear. The answer is no. Okay, based on the mentioned tip in the previous slide, what you should be discussing instead in the next paragraph is a highlight or a trend. Okay, look for the trends, look for the patterns, and focus on them. Do not discuss every detail. If you do that, your answer will be marked wrong. Okay, so let's take a look at this example paragraph 2, which focuses only on a certain highlight. Okay, after analyzing the two pie charts, whoever wrote this decided to focus on the overall enrollment in the 2 years. And what has the writer discovered or found out? What has he or she seen? Look at the example paragraph. Overall, it can be clearly seen that women received a much higher level of education in some land in 1995 than they did in 1945. So that one is a stark or a very obvious pattern or trend. Women in 1995 received a much higher level of education than women in 1945. What else can be said about this difference? In 1995, all girls, if you add these numbers, these percentages, you'll get 100%. 20 plus 10 plus 20 plus 50, 100%. In 1995, all girls were completing lower secondary. It's a different term pointing at what is lower secondary here. We have year 9. Okay, in order for a student to proceed to year 12 and first degree and postgraduate, he or she has to finish year 9. Okay, so since we are not seeing in 1995 students or ladies who enrolled year 6 or finish year 6, third grade, and no schooling, it means to say that all women in 1995 were studying in lower secondary in 1995. Okay? All of them reached lower secondary, year 9 in 1995. All girls were completing lower secondary, although 10% ended their schooling at this point. They stopped after year 9. 10% of women in 1995 stopped their schooling when they were in their lower secondary. This is in stark contrast with 1945. In 1945, only 41% of girls were enrolled to complete lower secondary. Okay, so those who were able to finish year 9, 12, and first degree are obviously those who were able to finish year 9. So let's add those up. Year 9, 10%, plus how many for year 12? 35, plus another 1% who was able to finish her first degree. So we have here 41. 35 plus 10 plus 1. Only 41% of girls were enrolled to complete lower secondary, with 36%, okay, 36, in order to get the first degree, a woman or whoever those women were should finish year 12, okay, only 36%, 35 plus 1, went to finish on to women went on to finish their secondary education, okay. Yeah, so those two are highlights. Now, are there anything else to mention? So this writer or whoever wrote this would like to highlight some more. And here's another example paragraph. In 1945, out of 36 women who completed their secondary education, only 1% went on to get a first degree. No women had completed postgraduate studies. This situation had changed radically by 1995. In 1995, 90% of women in some land had completed secondary education. You're seeing here 90%, you're not seeing here 90%, so it means to say that numbers were added, percentages were added. So who are these women? Women who completed secondary education. We have this one, those who got their first degree, those who finished year 12, secondary education, and those who enrolled for postgraduate. Okay, in order for a person to move on to a postgraduate degree, she or he has to finish a degree. Okay, so you see here, women had completed their secondary education, high school. In order to get one degree, you have to finish high school. Okay, so 50 plus 20 plus 20, we have here 90. These were the women who finished high school. And the 20% chose not to continue on to college. Half had graduated from college, and out of 50, okay, 20% had gone on to postgraduate studies. Okay. In conclusion, okay, that's the last paragraph. We can see that in the 50 years from 1945 to 1995, there have been huge positive developments to the education levels of women in some land. Okay, so I hope that this example will guide you in interpreting graphs in the future. First paragraph should be a brief and clear introduction of the graphic aid. The body paragraphs should present not all, okay, I repeat, not all the data, but the highlights or the trends which are worth mentioning. The last sentence, the last paragraph should be the conclusion. Okay, next let us move on to tables and graphs using APA 7th edition style. Okay, so what I will be showing you are guidelines in creating tables and figures using the 7th edition of APA. Tables usually show numerical values or textual information arranged in columns or rows. I suppose that this is not new to you. So what are the components of a table in the APA style? Okay. In terms of number or numbers, the table number goes above the table in bold. Okay. Example, table number 1, it should be in bold. Next, the title. The table title goes one double-spaced line below the table number in italics in title case. When we say title case, the first letter of each major word should be capitalized. Later on, I will show you an example for you to better understand. Headings. All tables should include column headings, including a heading for the leftmost column, also known as stub heading. The table body includes all the rows and columns of a table. The body can be single-spaced, 1.5 spaced, or double-spaced. Now, notes. If you need to add additional descriptions, okay, put them below the table. Not all table include table notes. I repeat, not all table include table notes. This one is just an additional uh, component. in creating an APA 7th edition style table. The purpose of notes is to simply describe further the contents of the table. It can also be something that would tell the readers about the source where you got the original table from. If you want to read more information about these, you may refer to pages 199 to 224 of the manual. Here is an example table in APA 7th edition. This is the table number in bold. This is the table title. Each first letter of each important word should be in capital letter. Okay? This is an example of a note. Look at the example. It's an explanation to supplement or to clarify information in the table body. Note: this table demonstrates the elements of a prototypical table. A general note: a table appears first and contains information needed to understand the table, including definitions of abbreviations. So if you have in your table abbreviations, you have to place the explanation or the definition of those abbreviations here. A specific note appears in a separate paragraph below. So if you have a specific note, it would look like this one. Okay? Okay, so this is an example of a table. Next, figures. What are figures? APA considers figures all types of graphical displays other than tables. So if it is not a table, then it is to be considered a figure in your research paper, in your thesis, or capstone. This includes, so if it's a photograph, if it is a drawing, a chart, a graph, a map, or any other illustration or non-textual portrayal of information, then it has to be labeled figure. What are the components of a figure? So for the figure number, it should go above the figure in bold. Example, figure 1. This is in contrast with the style in APA 6th edition. Figure numbers in APA 6th edition are placed underneath the figure. So if you would like to see the difference, you may simply Google the difference between figures and tables APA 6th edition and 7th edition. But this change or difference this alteration or change in the 7th edition is actually a very good change because it will not confuse anymore manuscript writers. Okay, so the way we label figures and tables is almost the same. For the title, the figure title appears one double-spaced line below the figure number in italics in title case. In title case, the first letter of major words are capitalized. The same with table titles. Image. The image part of the figure is the chart, graph, photograph, drawing, or other illustration itself. Legend. The figure legend, also known as a key, if used, if there is supposed to be a list or a legend beside the image, it should be positioned within the borders of the figure and explain any symbols used in the figure image. Now, if you need to add a note, it should appear below the figure to explain, describe, clarify, or supplement information in the image. Take note that just like tables, not all figures include notes. Notes are double-spaced and flush left. If you want to read more about the components of figures using APA 7th edition, visit or refer to pages 225 to 250 of the APA 7th edition manual. Okay, so here is an example of a figure. This is a map. So this is the figure number, the figure title. Take a look at the first letter of each important word. We have the word poverty, role, and United States. So first letters are capitalized. Title case. You see here the legend or the key to explain what the colors are for and what they mean. Okay, this one has a note. The map does not include data for Puerto Rico, and it is adapted from 2017 poverty rate in the United States by U.S. Census Bureau in 2017. And this is where the readers can find the same map. It's a public domain, so it can be borrowed. Okay, so this is an example. Okay, this is the third to the last slide for this presentation. These are additional notes that you should bear in mind when placing graphic aids on your manuscripts. First, if you use a table or figure from another source, if you borrow a table or a figure, then you must acknowledge this original source in a note placed underneath the table or figure within the text of your paper. I suppose that you still remember the example from the previous slide. Include the word note before your citation. The format for citations placed underneath tables and figures is different to those used in or for the reference list. Here is an example. Okay, so if you borrow a table or a figure from another source, this is how you cite the source. Note, adapted from the title, okay, who created this, or who are the authors, year, and the title of the journal, page, volume, and then page number. In the text, refer to every table and figure by its number. This one is a very common lapse or mistake by manuscript writers. It's known as a call out. When you call out a table or figure, also tell the readers what to look for in that table or figure. Example call outs. These are example call outs. Let me encircle those. Yeah, these are example call outs. This is how you should refer to your every table and figure on your manuscripts. Okay. As shown in Table 1, the demographic characteristics simply describe. Figure 2, mention the table or figure number shows what? Blank of the results or shows what? See Table 3, enclose in parentheses, period. Of the comparisons, enclose in parentheses, period should always be placed after the closing parentheses. This one is very important. Do not write the table above or below or the figure on page 32. Again, refer by its number. Refer to the table or figure by its number. Do not say these. Do not place these on your manuscripts. Page numbers often shift during the writing process, which can lead to errors. You will be able to see these same notes on page 197 of the APA 7th edition manual. This is the end of my presentation. If you want to read more about this lecture or this lesson, you may visit these references online. Thank you very much. This is the end of lesson 9.